I'm very sorry that we actually have to talk about these people because I followed them for a long time. They're jokes, they're clowns, they're morons, and unfortunately, they're trying to get organized, and that makes them very dangerous. And if you read the article, this talk is largely the same. The main difference, or I guess something to just add, is I will be using certain terms here that should have scare quotes around them. So just know that when I say certain things are left wing, they're not, and you should be able to pick that up. But anyhow, this should go for about 30-ish minutes. So let's get going. So if you spend any amount of time on social media, then it's possible you may have encountered the American Communist Party or the ACP. Their members constantly share images of themselves at strikes and performing community work. They also utilize the hammer and sickle along with other left-wing aesthetics. And based on their own statements, the ACP is proudly and unapologetically communist with a program for a revolutionary future. Yet a closer look at the ACP gives rise to serious doubts regarding their communist credentials. The founders of the ACP include the undefeated tanky warlord Haz al-Din, real name Ali Hamoud, who fancies himself their executive chairman. A law school dropout, Haz has devoted himself to streaming full-time. On his streams, which run for more than 4 hours, he projects an image of both a macho bully and that of a wise philosopher. It has his statements range from the idiotic to the absurd by claiming that the USA is already socialist, that the homeless are lords of the sidewalk who treat pedestrians like serfs, or that McDonald's is culturally communistic. And the most famous figure associated with the ACP is Jackson Hinkle, who has over 3 million followers on Twitter. Hinkle is a former Bernie bro turned online media personality who claims to be a Marxist-Leninist and American patriot. And based on his own confession, there is ample reason to believe that he has no firm political convictions at all, but merely wants fame and fortune. I do everything for the clout, he says. You've never seen me do something not for the clout. That's the only way I operate. Even more, the ACP does not engage in the type of activities that one would expect from a self-described communist party. They do not organize workers nor fight for the oppressed. Rather, their main activity consists of online bullying entailing the most backward elements of the Republican Party. The reality is that the ACP is not a communist party at all. After investigating their ideological influences, it becomes clear that the ACP is a reactionary, if not an openly fascist, organization. Now, one of the most important historical predecessors of the ACP can be found in the politics of the third position. This refers to a branch of fascist thought that claims to reject both Western-style capitalism and proletarian communism. Third positionists believe that they are neither right nor left, but aim to combine elements of both. For our purposes, however, the most important example of third positionism that is a precursor to the ACP can be found in Strasserism. And Strasserism takes its name from the brothers Otto and Gregor Strasser, who made up the so-called left wing of the Nazi Party. The Strasserite program provided a revolutionary veneer that appealed to the D-class workers and petty bourgeois elements who made up the rank and file of the Nazi brown shirts. Their political program included anti-capitalist demands for the nationalization of industry. Yet their particular variant of socialism was anti-materialist and anti-communist, emphasizing the spiritual values of the German Volk. One major element of Strasserite anti-capitalism that the ACP draws upon is their producerism. Now, producerism is a doctrine that prioritizes the so-called productive elements of society, such as farmers, industrial capitalists, and manual workers. The producers are framed as those who make genuine wealth and are viewed as the backbone of society. In opposition to the producers are the unproductive elites, such as bankers, speculators, financiers, and lazy immigrants who are parasitic upon society. And the Strasserites used producerism to champion an economic anti-Semitism, where Jews were portrayed as money-grubbing bankers who leached off the German Volk. It should be emphasized that Strasserite anti-capitalism is not equivalent to Marxist anti-capitalism. Strasserite anti-capitalism is set up as a clash between an authentic national community and a parasitic elite, not a class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And this enables the Strasserites to easily substitute racial struggle for class struggle, with the bourgeoisie now portrayed as international Jews. In their producerist narrative, the Jew becomes the evil puppet master pulling all the strings. Like third positionists, the ACP claims to transcend traditional politics. The Infrared Media Collective, founded by Haas, describes itself as Marxist-Leninist analysis beyond the visible spectrum. In another case, Haas claims that a communist partisan, a concept he borrows from the Nazi legal theorist Carl Schmitt, will transcend the left-right dichotomy. The partisan comes from below, Haas says. resolving the apparent contradiction between left and right by introducing an entirely new dimension of political alignment. It does not unite or synthesize left and right. It rather displaces the contradiction between them into a radically new form. It displaces the left and right distinction by articulating that distinction into an entirely new continuum of counter-hegemonic political space, end quote. The ACP also views the struggle against capitalism in terms of rescuing producers from parasitic monopolistic elites. In The Rise of MAGA Communism, Haas claims, communists don't want to socialize people's actual belongings or even businesses. What communists seek is the overthrow of the monopolists, the bankers, big pharma, big agriculture, big tech, and others who've hijacked the American Republic in the name of the sacred institution of private property. And Hinkle also advocates a variant of Strasserite communism that protects private property. He says, communists today don't support the eradication of private property. What we support is more growth, more wealth, more businesses for the people. Nor is producers' anti-Semitism foreign to the ACP. For example, Hinkle views the Jews as sinister elites who killed Jesus. Elsewhere on the Alex Jones show, yes, that guy, Hinkle claimed that a cabal of Trotskyites, a euphemism for Jews, are secretly controlling the world. The world is run by Trotskyites, Hinkle says. These are the most evil, sick human beings on the planet. It's the Clintonites, the Bushites, the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab. It's anybody who stands opposed to the American working class. And it should be emphasized that considering that Hinkle shot to fame on Twitter by claiming to support Palestine, his open anti-Semitism makes it imperative for all genuine anti-Zionists to thoroughly repudiate him. Now, in addition to Strasserite producerism, the ACP also draws upon Völkisch thinkers such as Martin Heidegger. In a long Twitter post entitled, Why Marxism is Not Woke, Haas claims that Marxist theory in the West is meaningless without the aid of Dugan and Heidegger's thinking. Let's start with Heidegger. Now, Martin Heidegger was one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. He was also a dedicated Nazi who saw his thinking as contributing to the revival of the German Volk, or people. Now, for Heidegger, an authentic culture of the Volk was rooted in the countryside, which is a source of tradition, life, and spiritual energy. And the spiritual world of a Volk, Heidegger says, is the power that comes from preserving, at the most profound level, the forces that are rooted in the soil and blood of a Volk, the power to arouse most inwardly and to shake most extensively the Volk's existence. A spiritual world alone will guarantee our Volk greatness. By contrast, modern civilization, with its cities, stood for the spiritually barren world of universalism, individualism, atomization, and rootlessness. This was represented above all by the cosmopolitan Jew. In other words, a true Volk was rooted in the countryside, while city dwellers such as the Jews were not part of the people since they were rootless and lacking a true soul. Therefore, Heidegger believed it was necessary to eliminate these carriers of universalism since they were the enemies of the authentic Volk. And he said, an enemy is each and every person who poses an essential threat to the Dasein or being of the people and its individual members. The enemy does not have to be external, and the external enemy is not even always the more dangerous one. The enemy can have attached itself to the innermost roots of the being of a people and can set itself against this people's essence and act against it. The struggle is all the fiercer and harder and tougher. For the least of it consists in coming to blows with one another. It is often far more difficult and wearisome to catch sight of the enemy as such, to bring the enemy into the open, to harbor no illusions about the enemy, to keep oneself ready for attack, to cultivate and intensify a constant readiness, and to prepare the attack looking far ahead with the goal of total annihilation. And the entire strategy of MAGA communism is premised upon Heideggerian ideas that the rooted American people are fighting cosmopolitan elites. According to Haas, the true source of resistance to the globalist system can be found in the American heartland, which is the base of MAGA. Therefore, communists must fuse with the authentic American people who compose the MAGA movement. Reality is the site of counter-hegemony, he says. Hegemony solidifies in the urban centers. To build a counter-hegemony, one must go to the base, the basis, and that is the rural hinterlands. That is where the counter-hegemonic organization is truly possible. That is what MAGA basically is. And in line with Völkisch thought, MAGA communists view the cities as centers of woke leftist values, such as women's liberation, anti-racism, gay rights, and internationalism. These are alien to the working class who respect values such as family, race, country, and traditional gender roles. Finally, Haas states that leftists act as a new fascist vanguard on behalf of the globalists. Leftism is the ideology of American unipolar imperialism, he says, the highest stage of bourgeois political modernity, which seeks to formalize not only all politics, but all culture, society, etc., under the principle of universal formal equality. The true heir of fascism, he says, is none other than leftism itself. And as an aside, this hostility to the cities and intellectual glasses wearers helped explain both the ACP's extreme anti-intellectualism and Haas's sympathetic remarks regarding Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. The Russian fascist and national Bolshevik Alexander Dugan has also influenced the ACP's thinking. In the 90s, Dugan's fascism took on the shape of National Bolshevism, which he believed would transcend both left and right by combining ultranationalism and revolutionary communist elan. And this attempt to forge a red-brown alliance in the Russian National Bolshevik Party prefigured later efforts by the ACP to align anti-imperialists with the MAGA movement. And the ACP also frames their understanding of global affairs through the prism of Dugan's understanding of multipolarity or Eurasianism. In his 1997 book, The Foundations of Geopolitics, Dugan argued that there was a conflict between the liberal Atlantic bloc led by the US and Eurasia led by Russia. He believed that Russia was destined to dominate Eurasia, roughly the territories of the former Soviet Union, and he also claimed that the United States was homogenizing the world by spreading global capitalism. By contrast, Dugan said that Russia represented traditional and nationally rooted peoples who are resisting cosmopolitan elites. And in Dugan's fourth political theory, he claims to advance the foundations of an entirely new political ideology. He states that the 20th century is dominated by the ideological struggle between three different political theories: liberalism, communism, and fascism. And now that liberalism stands triumphant, he argues for a fourth political theory that combines elements of communism and fascism in order to combat liberalism. Yet after all the theoretical obscurantism is swept away, it becomes clear that Dugan is merely rebranding fascism as part of a wider anti-democratic and anti-liberal coalition that brings together left and right. The influence of Dugan is readily apparent upon the ACP. For instance, both Haas and Hinkle have met with Dugan multiple times. Haas praised him as one of the most powerful minds of our era, and according to Hinkle, Dugan is one of the greatest men alive today, and encouraged his followers to buy Dugan's books from the Nazi publisher Arktos. In particular, Haas believes that the fourth political theory is identical with Marxism, and he also claims that Dugan's insights align with Mao Zedong thought. Mao was a Duganist before Dugan was ever even born, Haas says. Mao was already well acquainted and deeply immersed in the geopolitical, literary, civilizational, traditional, unconscious, demotic, national, and even mystical realities that had to be scandalously exhumed by Dugan. In addition, Haas and the ACP utilized Duganite concepts to frame their understanding of multipolarity. One tagline for Infrared is, "Find the vision, Marxism-Leninism in the age of multipolarity." In addition, they view the Russia-Ukrainian war as a defense of traditional civilization by Putin against globalist elites. Elsewhere, Haas has voiced support for Eurasianism. When he visited Russia in 2024, he met with members of the Eurasian Youth Union, the youth wing of Dugan's Eurasian Party, to discuss their common political ground. Furthermore, ACP members have pursued a Duganite strategy by bringing together the forces of the left and the right to oppose the deep state. For instance, Hinkle was one of the keynote speakers at the 2023 Rage Against the War Machine rally that brought together libertarians, fascists, cranks, leftists, and other morons in opposition to the Ukraine war. Lastly, Haas utilized Dugan's ideas to recast communism as a defense of American civilization. In a certain sense, Haas says, I regard communism as America's own manifest destiny, where America will finally confront itself as a definite, specific, and particular civilization, rather than the universal exception of all humanity. American communism means America as one country among others, rather than the center of the world. Finally, the concerns, interests, needs, and reality of our own people can be addressed instead of trying to act as the world police. In addition, the ACP program expresses Duganite ideas by highlighting the need to restore American culture and tradition. The Communist Party stands for the cultivation and discovery of a national continental American culture on the basis of the unique history, geography, and ethnic makeup of the American peoples. The Communist Party stands for the promotion of language, autonomy, and economic development and culture of American tribes. The Communist Party stands for the construction of a unified American historical, national, and cultural identity to overcome all racial and social antagonisms. In the end, Dugan's philosophy provides the core of the ACP's Marxism-Leninism, where the class struggle and internationalism are replaced with multipolarity and civilizational politics. A fourth major influence on the ACP can be found in the cult leader, Lyndon LaRouche. LaRouche was originally a Trotskyist who turned to the far right in the 70s. In his shift to the right, his cadre physically attacked members of both the Communist and Socialist Workers' parties during Operation Mappa. And he's also cultivated ties to intelligence agencies and a wide range of conservative groups, including the Ku Klux Klan. At the same time, LaRouche developed increasingly elaborate and unhinged conspiracy theories where the Jews, through the medium of the British Empire, have dominated the United States. Now, LaRouche's use of the British as a stand-in for the Jews was part of a deliberate rhetorical strategy on his part. He often promoted his anti-Semitic conspiracism with euphemisms or code words as, he said, an artificial mechanism to avoid the moral shock of facing bestiality in its most degenerate forms. And in the 70s, LaRouche used this approach to instill far-right ideas amongst his then left-leaning followers, since open anti-Semitism was still considered beyond the pale. And the ACP follows a similar approach of denying open anti-Semitism, preferring dog whistles such as globalists, the deep state, along with singling out finance capital and Jews such as George Soros, and above all, Leon Trotsky, who for them is the epitome of a satanic cosmopolitan Jew who rejects all traditional values. And Hawes has also repeated LaRouche's conspiracy theories that the British Empire secretly rules the United States. The American Republic, he says, was founded on the basis of seceding from the empire. It has become an empire also because we've allowed the British intelligence to conquer our country. The British ruling class conquered our deep state and our country and became our ruling class. So yeah, we became an empire. And as we shall see later, conspiracism is ever present in how the ACP views protests against Trump. And the direct influence of LaRouche upon the ACP is not very hard to find. For one, the cult-like structure of the ACP feels like a cheap copy of LaRouche's method of organization. And other places, ACP members have also praised LaRouche as a great political thinker. In one stream, Haas said, even for those who might disagree with LaRouche's philosophy, they must at least concede that he is one of the most, if not the most, profound theorists and thinkers of policy in the modern age. And both Haas and Hinkle have organizational connections to the LaRouche movement. They're both acquaintances with Daniel Burke, one of its more prominent figures. And Haas has interviewed Burke on his stream. And alongside Burke, both Haas and Hinkle were speakers at the Build the New Paradigm, Defeat Green Fascism conference hosted by the LaRouche-affiliated Schiller Institute in October of 2022. As dedicated producerists, the LaRoucheites want nothing to constrain the productive capacity of the U.S. This means both the ACP and the LaRouche movement are adamantly opposed to the environmentalist movement, viewing it as a harbinger of Malthusian fascism. Now, despite all its irrationalist and reactionary components, the ACP does not self-identify itself as a fascist organization. Instead, its constitution declares Marxism-Leninism constitutes the official outlook of the American Communist Party. This immediately raises the question what exactly the ACP means by Marxism-Leninism. Now, as opposed to proletarian internationalism, the ACP privileges the nationalist outlook of Stalin's socialism in one country. For example, Haas declared, socialism in one country reflected the precise logic that universal communism can only be built up within a determinate communal being, not a vain pretension to the entire world, but a concrete, grounded relationship between a specific party and a specific country. In other words, the ACP wants to purge communism of anything remotely revolutionary and universalist. Instead, they celebrate the Stalinist thermidor with its revival of the traditional family, social hierarchies, cultural conservatism, and the promotion of material incentives crowned by despotic bureaucracy as genuine socialism. Yet even more than traditional Stalinism, the ACP is more closely aligned to the late Stalinism of the 50s with its anti-Semitic campaigns against rootless cosmopolitans, the Doctor's Plot, and the promotion of Russian chauvinism. In addition, the ACP's chauvinism has a historical antecedent with the Popular Front line upheld by the Communist Party USA in the 30s and 40s. Under General Secretary Earl Browder, the party declared communism is the Americanism of the 20th century. The CPUSA declared that communism was heir to the patriotic, democratic, and radical traditions of the United States. And its cadre marched behind the Stars and Stripes while its mass meetings had banners displaying Washington and Lincoln. And in its search for political respectability, the Communist Party became little more than a wing of the Democrats. And during World War II, the party was second to none in support of the war effort. And to that end, they backed the internment of Japanese Americans, they broke strikes, they abandoned anti-racist struggles, and ultimately even dissolved the party itself. And Browder's national chauvinism aligns perfectly with the ACP, with the important caveat that they were prepared to tail the Republicans as opposed to the Democrats. And the ACP also adheres to the campus politics of the former Trotskyist and Workers' World Party founder Sam Marcy. And in the 50s, Marcy developed a perspective of global class war, where the conflict between the Soviet bloc and American imperialism now superseded the class struggle internationally and within each country. That meant that U.S. socialists must uncritically defend the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Cuba, what have you. Eventually, this Marxian analysis extended to viewing any government opposed to the United States, whether Iran, Syria, the Russian Federation, what have you, as not merely anti-imperialist, but as a positive good, if not outright socialists. So not only does the ACP fanatically support the so-called Russian special military operation in Ukraine, but Haas thinks Vladimir Putin is still fighting for communism. And one key linkage between Marxism and the ACP can be found in the figure of Caleb Spanky Maupin, a former member of the Workers' World Party. Maupin left the party in 2015 to pursue a career as a journalist for Iranian and Russian state media. Leaving aside Marxism, he has embraced LaRouche, Putin, Dugan, and Trump. While they have since fallen out, Maupin had a long association with Haas and Hinkel. In 2021, Maupin, Haas, and Hinkel shared several streams together where they discussed various conspiracy theories regarding the synthetic left, who support imperialism and the need for patriotic socialism. The following year, Haas and Hinkel were major speakers at the Austin conference held by Maupin's Center for Political Innovation. Finally, the ACP frames their defense of so-called actually existing socialism, especially in China, as overcoming the purity fetish and abstract revolutionism that they believe predominates in Western Marxism. According to ACP Education Secretary Carlos Garrido, the Western Marxist purity fetish makes them immune to seeing socialist construction as a process, one which will undoubtedly develop contradictions which will in time be likely overcome. Garrido also believes that their attachment to the purity fetish ensures that Western Marxists remain a controlled opposition who do not fundamentally challenge imperialism. Ultimately, the ACP's rejection of the purity fetish is nothing more than blind worship of the Chinese state for rapidly expanding the productive forces. It should be observed that Garrido is a co-founder of the misnamed Midwestern Marx Institute, also known as the Midwestern Mussolini Institute, a self-described Marxist-Leninist think tank founded in 2020. Early on, Midwestern Mussolini was publishing content on the importance of proletarian patriotism in the class struggle and the need for socialism with American characteristics. They also have an aversion to anti-oppression politics, viewing the struggle for gay rights as something promoted by corporate liberals and a distraction from the class struggle. Midwestern Mussolini also tails fascists, believing that they can join together with them on purely economic basis to fight the ruling class. And when the ACP was formed, Noah Kravnik, Eddie Smith, and Carlos Garrido from Midwestern Mussolini were all found amongst its leadership. Now we come to the final element of the ACP's ideology, which is MAGA Communism. Originally a hashtag that went viral on Twitter in 2022, MAGA Communism was developed by both Haas and Hinkel. In its defense of the idea, Haas argues that Donald Trump fundamentally changed American politics by reintroducing class struggle and challenging the status quo. At one point, Haas claimed that Trump was more anti-imperialist than the whole Western left. Trump was far, far more an anti-imperialist than all the bozo white leftist frauds combined in the history of the American left. I'm not scared to be associated with Trump. Trump is not ideologically, but in practice, he was far more an anti-imperialist than all the bozo scum combined. In addition, Haas claims that MAGA communism is a genuine proletarian movement, and MAGA is irrefutably the only workers' political movement that exists in America. Finally, he argues that communism represents the unspoken desire of MAGA. The unity of communism and with MAGA is nothing more than the unity of Marxism with the workers' movement. We believe the MAGA movement has the potential to be turbocharged into a revolutionary movement by, of, and for the American working class. For Haas, this means that the American left has a choice of either staying with the fake urban leftist milieu or joining up with the only mass working class and anti-establishment movement that exists in America. To make this very simple and blunt, every single claim of MAGA communism is moronic and utterly wrong. For one, Donald Trump does not represent a challenge to the capitalist system at any level. His campaigns have espoused various right-wing populist, conspiracist, and racist ideas, and as president, Trump has carried out a wholly reactionary agenda. The MAGA movement is nothing more than a Trump fan club with an overwhelmingly petty bourgeois and bourgeois social base. In no moment has MAGA ever supported a picket line, blocked the deportation of immigrants, or shown a trace of proletarian internationalism. Now, despite their clear adulation of Trump, MAGA communists have attempted to distance themselves from him. Posts can be found on Twitter that they were merely joking or that the strategy was just trying to reach the working class base of MAGA. As Haas said in one interview, we have a saying as MAGA communists, which is that when you go to McDonald's, you don't go for the clown, you go for the burger. Trump is the mascot of the movement. All this sophistry aside, the ACP has clearly supported Trump's 2024 campaign. For instance, Hinkel supported Tulsi Gabbard for Secretary of State, and he's actually personally associated with her. He praised Trump for supposedly ending wars, and he said he had Trump's back. And it should be noted, the ACP described movements against Trump, such as the June 2025 LA protests, as a color revolution sponsored by finance capital. According to Hinkel, the riots in LA are a deep state color revolution attempt. Trump is deporting far less migrants than Biden, but now faces war. Trump is also taking full advantage of this crisis to wield unchecked authority and surveillance. Finance capital are the only winners here. As an aside, It's also worth noting that the ACP also defends other Republican presidents. For example, Haas described Richard Nixon as a counter-hegemonic leader who was ousted by the CIA with the Watergate break-in. Now, since the ACP tails the GOP, they view contemporary politics through the same cultural war lens as them. This means that the ACP sees the urban Democrats and their leftist auxiliaries with their woke agenda as the main enemy. Due to their culturalist framing, the ACP adopts a narrow definition of the working class that excludes anyone outside of a stereotype male industrial factory worker from circa 1850. This means Haas views most unions as integral parts of the democratic apparatus, meaning they need to be destroyed. Naturally, he cheered the first Trump administration for carrying out a working class agenda by attacking unions. Or as Haas succinctly said once, fuck union organizing. Perhaps nothing exemplifies the ACP's culturalist view of the working class and their condemnation of barista service workers. In contrast to masculine factory workers, baristas are disparaged as effeminate and unproductive. Yet this is a moralistic view of productive versus unproductive labor, as opposed to a Marxist understanding. For Marx, unproductive labor generates surplus value for the capitalists. By contrast, unproductive labor does not directly generate surplus value for the capitalists. The key insight here regards productive from the point of view of the capitalists. This is not a moral judgment on the labor carried out, but an objective analysis of the role labor performs for capital. So Marx does not condemn unproductive labor while praising productive work. Morals don't play a role in a scientific analysis. And even more than that, a barista is actually performing productive labor from a Marxist point of view. Baristas may not be growing or picking the coffee that they serve, yet capitalists do not just sell beans and milk to every customer at Starbucks. As service workers, they produce a commodity by assembling the ingredients of coffee to generate surplus value for the capitalists. So the APC's opposition to unproductive baristas cannot be justified in terms of Marxist political economy. Rather, their position is based entirely on cultural terms. For the ACP, a barista signifies decadent, cosmopolitan urban values, along with representing marginal groups whom they detest, such as women, gays, and racial minorities. Yet the ACP believes that when they are fighting the woke baristas, they're actually defending the traditionalist working class. So, on July 21st, 2024, the American Communist Party was founded by Haas, Hinkel, and others from the Midwestern Mussolini Institute, and allegedly from dissident chapters in the Communist Party. And since its launch, the ACP has proven to be incredibly disorganized. It took 4 months before they held a founding conference and adopted a hastily written constitution. In terms of their day-to-day activity, the ACP has done minor charity work, such as picking up trash, and have taken selfies at picket lines. In terms of their class base, the ACP seems composed of machismo petty bourgeois young men with incel attitudes and not a slither of artistic talent among them, hence their reliance on AI slop for propaganda. While they don't consider baristas to be workers, they don't actually have much of a problem when it comes to working with the cops. Yet the bulk of their activism occurs online. For the ACP, it is imperative to control the social media narrative, which means all their real-life actions are predicated on gaining likes and retweets. In order to increase their online clout, the ACP has exaggerated their party membership actions and even falsely claimed Haas was almost assassinated while visiting the Donbass. Carlos Garita believes that lying is acceptable since it brings recruits into the party. And according to former members, they quote, "The ACP is a cult of personality with the top ranks filled by narcissists, cowards, and self-interested grifters shrouded in a veil of legitimacy by the rank-and-file membership and their well-intentioned by woefully unskilled and disconnected work." Now, one should generally question how well-intentioned anyone is who ever joined the ACP cesspool. The rest is actually fairly well set. Moreover, Haas himself is an incompetent and disorganized Führer who runs the ACP as his own little fiefdom. During meetings, he threatens and verbally abuses members by shouting homophobic slurs, and to build the organization, he wants the ACP to act as the businesses where chapters will unleash their entrepreneurial spirit by becoming landlords. And it should go without much saying that the ACP is filled with rampant misogyny, homophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, and chauvinism. To bring us back to our opening point, the ACP is only communist in terms of its name. In everything else, they are a sewer of reaction, irrationalism, and anti-communism. They are led by narcissistic bullies, conmen, and morons who preach fascist nonsense dressed up as Marxism. Beyond all the verbiage, MAGA communism means not only supporting Donald Trump, but also tailing the most reactionary elements of society. The ACP's practice can be summed up as a bizarro mass line of unite the backward, drive away the intermediate, and isolate the advance. Now, despite the clear reactionary nature of the ACP and MAGA communism, there seems to be confusion among some leftists on how to deal with them. In a very uneven article about the ACP published in Cosmonaut magazine, Soldier of Love stated, "I wish the best for the ACP, and I hope that they focus more on on-the-ground activity and that we might even get a chance to work together to help our communities." Other writers have stressed the need to engage those attracted to the ACP in order to win over their supporters. This is all the wrong approach to take toward them. These are not wayward, but otherwise well-meaning leftists in a different organization whom we can do joint work with. Contrary to an old saying, the ACP are not left in form and right in essence. They are just right in form and right in essence. They represent a deranged movement of fascists who should not be welcomed in our spaces. We do not wish them well. We do not want to work with them. We want to defeat them. So we must adopt diametrically different politics than the ACP. Revolutionary communists must aspire to be, as Lenin proclaimed, tribunes of the people who fight against all forms of exploitation and oppression. And unlike the ACP dipshits, we do not tail backward ideas such as nationalism, misogyny, homophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism. At the same time, it should not be surprising that many workers enter political life with these ideas. However, it is possible for communists to meet people where they are without politically adapting ourselves to outworn prejudices and notions. Rather, it is our task to lead the masses to correct conclusions and effective action against the bourgeoisie without adapting to backward ideas. As history has proven, this is the only path that leads to communism. What the ACP offers is not a shortcut to communism, but the highway to hell. Thank you.